The pot was empty by dawn, but Rebecca Thornton had fed 12 starving men with nothing more than dried beans, a bit of salt pork, and prayers her mother taught her back in Philadelphia. She stood in the ranch house kitchen as the June morning light filtered through grimy windows, watching the last cowboy scrape his tin plate clean with a piece of cornbread she had managed to bake in the temperamental stove. The year was 1878, and she had been in Oregon exactly 3 weeks, arriving in Portland with her aunt's family only to be shuffled off to this failing cattle operation when her uncle decided she was too much of a burden to keep in town. The ranch hands filed past her one by one, hats in their weathered hands, mumbling thanks that seemed to embarrass them. They were gaunt men, all angles and hunger, their clothes patched and repatched until the original fabric was merely a suggestion. The ranch foreman had warned her that morning that there was barely enough food for 6 men, let alone 12, but she had looked at those hollow faces and decided that going hungry herself was preferable to sending anyone away from the table. The last man through the door was different from the others. He was tall, broad-shouldered despite the obvious lack of proper meals, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of Oregon pine forests. He held his hat against his chest and studied her with an intensity that made her fingers tighten on her apron. "That was the best meal I have had in 6 months, Miss Thornton," he said, his voice low and sincere. "I do not know how you managed it, but you have a gift." Rebecca felt heat rise to her cheeks. "It was just beans and salt pork, Mr. Yates Ingram," he supplied, and a small smile touched his lips. "But most folks call me Yates. I am one of the hired hands here, though I have not been around much lately. Been working the north pasture trying to round up strays." "Well, Mr. Ingram, I am glad you found it satisfactory, though I confess I have never cooked for so many with so little before." "You did more than make it satisfactory. You made it taste like home." He settled his hat back on his head and nodded to her. "I usually take my supper in town on Saturdays. There is a boarding house that serves meals for 2 bits, but if you will be cooking here regular, I would be obliged to stay and help out around the place in exchange." Before Rebecca could respond, he was gone, his boots echoing on the wooden porch as he headed back toward the bunkhouse. She stood in the empty kitchen, surrounded by scraped clean plates and the lingering smell of wood smoke and coffee, wondering what she had gotten herself into. The ranch belonged to a man named Cornelius Drake, a Philadelphia businessman who had never set foot in Oregon but had won the property in a card game 5 years earlier. He had hired a series of managers to run it, each one more incompetent than the last, and the place had fallen into disrepair. The current manager, Martin Fletcher, was a thin, nervous man who spent most of his time in the small office going over ledgers and muttering about expenses. When Rebecca's uncle had written to him about needing a position for his niece, Fletcher had jumped at the chance to have someone else handle the cooking and cleaning for next to no wages. Rebecca had arrived to find a house that had not been properly cleaned in years, a kitchen with broken windows and a smoking stove, and absolutely no supplies beyond some flour, beans, and a few strips of salt pork that were more salt than pork. The ranch hands were surviving on thin stew and whatever game they could shoot, and morale had sunk so low that 3 men had quit the previous week. She spent that first Saturday cleaning the kitchen until her hands were raw, scrubbing away years of accumulated grease and grime. She found a crate of mason jars in the cellar and made plans to start a garden if she could get seeds. The stove fought her at every turn, smoking and refusing to maintain an even temperature. But she had learned to cook on her grandmother's temperamental cast iron range back east, and eventually she coerced the Oregon beast into submission. By the time Sunday rolled around, she had taken stock of what little they had and made a plan. There were wild herbs growing near the creek, and she remembered her grandmother talking about how a little sage or thyme could transform the simplest dish. She spent the morning gathering what she could find, earning curious looks from the ranch hands who passed her as they headed out for their various chores. Yates Ingram was among them, riding a rangy bay gelding that had seen better days. He reined in when he saw her kneeling by the creek with her skirts tucked up, picking through the vegetation. "Morning, Miss Thornton. You looking for something in particular?" She shaded her eyes to look up at him. "Herbs. Sage, if I can find it, maybe some wild onions." He swung down from his horse with easy grace despite his evident exhaustion. "I know where there is a patch of wild onions about a quarter-mile upstream, and there is sage all over the hillside behind the north pasture. I could show you if you like. I would not want to take you from your work." "My work can wait an hour. Besides, if it means another meal like yesterday, it is worth the time." He offered her his hand to help her to her feet, and she took it, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip. They walked along the creek, leading his horse behind them, and he pointed out various plants as they went. He knew the land intimately, could identify every shrub and tree, knew where the deer bedded down and where the wild turkeys roosted. He had come to Oregon 3 years earlier from Wyoming, following rumors of ranch work and steady pay, only to find that the rumors were far better than the reality. "I have been thinking about moving on," he admitted as they climbed the gentle slope toward the wild onion patch. "Most of the men have. Mr. Fletcher means well, but he does not know ranching, and Mr. Drake does not care enough to learn. We go weeks without proper wages, and the food has been scarce. Some of the men have been talking about heading south to California, maybe finding work there." Rebecca felt an unexpected pang at the thought of him leaving. "But you are still here." "For now. I suppose I keep hoping things will turn around. This is good land, Miss Thornton. With proper management, this ranch could thrive. It just needs someone who cares enough to make it work." They reached the onion patch, and Rebecca set to work digging up the bulbs with a small trowel she had brought. Yates helped, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he loosened the soil. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, the morning sun warming their backs. "Why did you come west?" he asked eventually. "Philadelphia is a long way from Oregon." Rebecca sat back on her heels, brushing dirt from her hands. "My parents died 2 years ago. Yellow fever. My aunt and uncle took me in, but they have 6 children of their own, and I was just another mouth to feed. When my uncle heard about this position, he arranged it quickly. I think he was relieved to have one less person to worry about. That must have been hard, losing your folks, then being sent away." "It was. But I am not helpless, Mr. Ingram. I can work. I can earn my keep. And maybe here I can build something of my own, even if it is just a reputation as a decent cook." He smiled at that, a real smile that reached his eyes and made him look younger despite the dust and weariness. "I think you will be more than a decent cook, Miss Thornton. I think you might just save this ranch," she laughed, though the idea seemed absurd. "I hardly think a pot of beans can save a failing cattle operation. You would be surprised what a good meal can do for a man's spirit. And from what I saw yesterday, you have already done more for morale than Fletcher has managed in 6 months." They returned to the ranch house with Rebecca's basket full of wild onions and a bundle of sage that Yates had gathered from the hillside. As they approached the kitchen door, he paused. "I meant what I said yesterday, about taking my meals here instead of in town. If you will have me, I would like to help out around the house. I can fix that broken window, get the stove drawing properly, maybe build you a proper root cellar for storage, in exchange for meals, of course." Rebecca studied him, this tall cowboy with kind eyes and work-roughened hands. "You do not need to barter for meals, Mr. Ingram. You work for this ranch. You are entitled to eat here." "Maybe so, but I would feel better earning it. And please call me Yates." "Mr. Ingram makes me feel like I should be wearing a suit and working in a bank." "Only if you call me Rebecca. Miss Thornton makes me sound like a schoolteacher. Deal." He tipped his hat to her and headed back toward the barn, and Rebecca carried her herbs into the kitchen, feeling lighter than she had since arriving in Oregon. Over the following weeks, a pattern emerged. Rebecca would rise before dawn to start the cooking fires, and Yates would appear in the kitchen shortly after, ostensibly to fix something or build something, but always staying to help with the meal preparation. He brought her fresh game when he could, rabbits and the occasional deer, and she transformed them into stews and roasts that made the ranch hands linger at the table, talking and laughing instead of bolting their food and disappearing. The broken window was repaired. The stove began drawing properly after Yates cleaned out years of accumulated creosote from the chimney. He built a smokehouse behind the kitchen so they could preserve meat, and started construction on a proper root cellar that would keep vegetables cool through the summer. Fletcher noticed the change in the men's attitude, and perhaps sensing that Rebecca was somehow responsible, stopped complaining about food costs and actually provided her with a small budget to buy supplies in Portland. She made the trip to town once a week in the ranch wagon, carefully selecting flour, sugar, coffee, and other staples, stretching every dollar as far as it would go. It was on one of these trips to town that she encountered Yates's past in the form of a woman named Caroline Marsh. Rebecca had stopped at the general store to buy thread when a striking blonde woman in an expensive riding habit approached her. "You must be the new cook at the Drake Ranch," Caroline said, her voice pleasant but her eyes assessing. "I have heard quite a bit about you. Apparently you are working miracles with very little." "I do my best, miss." "Marsh, Caroline Marsh. My father owns the Triple Barham Ranch just north of the Drake property. We are the largest cattle operation in the county." She paused, then added, "I understand Yates Ingram is still working at the Drake place." Something in the way she said his name made Rebecca tense. "Yes, he is one of the ranch hands." "How interesting. I had thought he would have moved on by now. We courted for a time, you know, last summer. But he had such grand ideas about making his own way, buying his own land, being his own boss. I told him he should come work for my father, that we could offer him a real future, but he was too proud." She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. Cowboys and their pride. Such a waste. Rebecca felt her chest tighten with an emotion she did not want to name. "I should be going. I have supplies to load." "Of course. It was lovely to meet you, Miss Thornton. Do give Yates my regards." The encounter left Rebecca unsettled. That evening, as she and Yates worked side by side preparing supper for the hands, she found herself watching him differently. Had he loved Caroline Marsh? Did he still? "You are quiet tonight," he observed, chopping onions with the knife she had sharpened for him. "Something happened in town." "I met Caroline Marsh." His hand stilled for a moment, then resumed chopping. "Did you? She said you courted last summer, for a few weeks. It did not work out." He scraped the onions into the pot where beans were already simmering. "She wanted me to be someone I am not. Work for her father, let him groom me to take over his operation eventually. Maybe marry her and become part of the Marsh dynasty. That sounds like a good opportunity. It sounds like a cage." He set down the knife and turned to face her. "Rebecca, I do not want to be someone's employee forever, building someone else's dream. I want my own land, my own herd, something I can be proud of." Caroline could not understand that. She thought I was being foolish, throwing away security for a dream that might never happen. And what do you think? I think a dream is worth pursuing even if it is hard, especially if it is hard. He held her gaze. And I think Caroline Marsh and I wanted very different things from life. She wanted status and comfort. I want something real. Rebecca turned back to the stove, her heart beating faster. That is admirable. Is it? Some days I wonder if she was right, if I am just a stubborn fool chasing something that does not exist. You are not a fool, Yates, and dreams are important. Without them, what do we have? He moved closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. What are your dreams, Rebecca Thornton? She considered the question carefully. I want to belong somewhere, to have a home that is truly mine, not just a borrowed space where I am tolerated. I want to build something lasting. Maybe that sounds small compared to owning a ranch, but it is what I want. It does not sound small at all. It sounds like the most important thing in the world. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, something that made Rebecca's breath catch in her throat. The moment was broken by the sound of boots on the porch as the ranch hands began arriving for supper. But the feeling lingered, settling in Rebecca's chest like a warm ember. July brought scorching heat to the Oregon high desert country east of Portland. The creek ran lower, and the grass turned brown except in the irrigated pastures close to the ranch buildings. Fletcher made a rare trip to Portland to meet with the bank, and returned looking even more worried than usual. He called the ranch hands together that evening and delivered the news. Mr. Drake has decided to sell the ranch. He has an offer from a cattle company out of San Francisco, and they want to take possession by September. That gives us about 2 months. You will all be paid what you are owed, and I will write letters of reference for anyone who needs them. The men received the news with grim resignation. Most had been expecting it. But Rebecca felt as though the ground had shifted beneath her feet. She had only been here 2 months, but already this place felt more like home than her aunt's house in Portland ever had. And Yates, what would happen to Yates? She found him after the meeting, standing near the horse corral and staring out at the darkening hills. I am sorry, she said softly. Not your fault. This ranch has been dying for years. I suppose I am surprised it lasted this long. What will you do? Move on, I guess. Maybe try California after all, or head back to Wyoming. He turned to face her. What about you? I do not know. Go back to Portland, I suppose. Try to find another position. Though I doubt my aunt will be happy to see me. Rebecca. He reached out and took her hand, his fingers warm and rough against hers. Come with me, her heart stuttered. What? Come with me. We could head south, find work on one of the big ranches in California. You could cook, I could cowboy. We could save our wages, maybe eventually buy a piece of land of our own. Yates, we barely know each other. Do you really believe that? I feel like I have known you my whole life. These past 2 months, working alongside you, talking with you, learning who you are, it has been the best time I can remember. And I hope, that you feel something similar. She did. That was the terrifying part. She had fallen for this cowboy with his quiet strength and kind eyes, his dreams and his determination. But the idea of running off with him, of trusting her future to a man she had known for such a short time, was frightening. I need to think about it, she said finally. Of course. Take all the time you need. Just know that the offer stands. That night, lying in her narrow bed in the small room off the kitchen, Rebecca stared at the ceiling and weighed her options. She could return to Portland, throw herself on her aunt's mercy, and try to find work as a domestic servant or seamstress. She could write to acquaintances back in Philadelphia, see if anyone knew of positions available. Or she could take a leap of faith with Yates Ingram, gambling her future on the connection they had built over beans and wild onions and long conversations in the kitchen. The next morning, she rose before dawn as usual and started breakfast. Yates appeared in the doorway just as the sun was cresting the eastern hills, his hat in his hands and hope in his eyes. "I need more time," she told him before he could speak. "This is a big decision, Yates. Please understand." "I do. I will wait as long as you need." But fate, it seemed, had other plans. 3 days later, a rider arrived from the Triple Bar M Ranch with an urgent message. There had been an accident. One of the Marsh Ranch's line shacks had caught fire, and 2 cowboys were badly burned. They needed help, anyone who could be spared, and they needed a cook to feed the men who would be fighting the fire and helping with the rescue efforts. Fletcher immediately volunteered Rebecca, along with Yates and 4 other hands. Within an hour, they were riding north with a wagon full of supplies and medical items Rebecca had hastily gathered. The Marsh Ranch was everything the Drake Ranch was not: prosperous, well-maintained, efficient. The main house was a sprawling 2-story structure with a wide porch and fresh paint. The barns were solid and full of good horses. Even in the midst of the crisis, Rebecca could see the wealth and care that had been invested in the operation. Caroline Marsh met them in the yard, her face streaked with soot and her expensive clothes ruined. "Thank God. We have 20 men out fighting the fire, and another dozen tending to the injured. We need food, coffee, anything you can manage." Rebecca took charge immediately, commandeering the Marsh Ranch kitchen and assessing what was available. Unlike the Drake Ranch, the Marsh pantry was well stocked with everything from cured hams to canned vegetables to fresh eggs. She set to work making huge pots of stew, baking dozens of biscuits, and brewing coffee by the gallon. Yates and the other Drake hands rode out to help fight the fire, and Rebecca did not see him again until late that night when the men came in exhausted and filthy. She served them food, refilled their coffee, and listened as they talked about the fire, which had been contained but not before destroying the line shack and badly injuring the 2 men inside. Caroline found her in the kitchen well after midnight, when Rebecca was finally cleaning up. "You did exceptional work today. I have never seen anyone organize a kitchen operation so efficiently under pressure." "Thank you. How are the injured men?" "Alive, thanks to the doctor and a great deal of luck. My father wants to thank you personally tomorrow." Caroline paused, then added, "I saw you watching Yates earlier." Rebecca felt her face heat. "I was checking on all the men." "Of course you were." Caroline's smile was knowing. "He is a good man, Rebecca. I was not lying about that. I just wanted something from him that he could not give me." "If you are smart, you will not make the same mistake." "I am not sure what you mean." "Do not try to change him. Do not try to make him into something he is not. He needs to follow his own path, even if it is harder than the alternatives. If you can accept that, you might have a chance at real happiness with him." It was surprisingly generous advice from a woman who had every reason to be catty about her former suitor. Rebecca studied Caroline in the lamplight and saw a kind of resignation there, a acceptance of things that could not be changed. "Thank you," Rebecca said quietly. "You are welcome. Now go get some sleep. Tomorrow will be just as busy." Rebecca was given a guest room in the main house, a beautiful space with real wallpaper and a 4-poster bed. She lay awake in the unfamiliar luxury and thought about Caroline's words. Do not try to change him. It was the opposite of what Caroline herself had tried to do, and perhaps that was why it had not worked between them. Could Rebecca accept Yates as he was, with his dreams and his wandering ways? Could she build a life with a man who might never have the security and stability she had always craved? The next morning brought grim news. One of the injured cowboys had died during the night despite the doctor's best efforts. His name was Thomas Wells, and he had worked for the Marsh Ranch for 5 years. He left behind a young wife in Portland, and a baby daughter he would never see grow up. The tragedy hung over the ranch like a pall. Rebecca helped prepare food for the funeral, which was held 2 days later in the small cemetery on a hill overlooking the ranch. She stood beside Yates during the service, and when he reached out and took her hand, she held on tight, grateful for the connection. After the funeral, they walked together back toward the bunkhouse where the Drake Ranch hands were staying. The day was warm, the sky a brilliant blue that seemed at odds with the sorrow they all felt. "Life is short," Yates said suddenly. Thomas was only 23. He thought he had all the time in the world to build a life with his wife, to watch his daughter grow. But he did not. None of us know how much time we have. Rebecca understood what he was saying. "I know. I am not trying to pressure you, Rebecca. I just want you to understand that I am serious about this, about us. I want to build a life with you, whatever that looks like. We can go to California or stay in Oregon or head to Wyoming or anywhere else you want to go. The location does not matter. What matters is that we do it together." She stopped walking and turned to face him. The afternoon sun caught in his dark hair, highlighting the green in his eyes. He looked tired and sad and absolutely sincere, and in that moment, Rebecca knew what her answer was. "Yes. Yes. Yes, I will come with you. Yes, I want to build a life with you. Yes to all of it." The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise. He pulled her into his arms, right there in the open where anyone could see, and held her close. She felt his heart beating against hers, felt the strength of his embrace, and knew she had made the right choice. "We should get married," he said into her hair. "Before we leave Oregon, I want to do this properly. Are you proposing, Yates Ingram?" He pulled back just enough to look at her face. "I am. I do not have a ring, and this is not the most romantic setting, but yes. Rebecca Thornton, will you marry me? Yes. Absolutely yes." They were married 3 weeks later in Portland, in a small church with Fletcher and a few of the ranch hands as witnesses. Rebecca wore a simple blue dress she had made herself, and Yates borrowed a suit from one of the other cowboys. They had no family present, no grand celebration, just a minister's blessing and the promise they made to each other before God. The Drake Ranch was officially sold on August 15th, and the new owners arrived with their own crew and their own plans. Fletcher was offered a position as assistant manager, which he gratefully accepted. The original ranch hands were paid their final wages and given their letters of reference. Yates and Rebecca used their combined savings to buy train tickets to California. They planned to try the big ranches around Sacramento first, see if they could find work that would allow them to save toward buying land of their own. The night before they were due to leave, Rebecca stood in the ranch house kitchen one last time. She had scrubbed it clean, leaving it better than she found it, and now she ran her hand over the counter where she had prepared so many meals. This was where it had all started, where she had fed 12 hungry ranch hands from one pot, and caught the attention of a cowboy who had changed her life. "Ready?" Yates appeared in the doorway, their bags in his hands. "Ready." They took a room in a boarding house in Portland for their final night in Oregon. It was their wedding night, though delayed by weeks of practical concerns and preparations. Rebecca was nervous, though not afraid. Yates was gentle and patient, and when he kissed her, she felt everything else fall away. They came together in the narrow boarding house bed as the city sounds filtered through the window, discovering each other with tenderness and growing passion. Yates whispered her name like a prayer, and Rebecca held him close, marveling at how her life had changed in just 4 months. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, and Yates traced patterns on her shoulder with his fingertips. "I never thought I would find this," he said softly. "Someone who understands me, someone who wants the same things I want, someone who makes me feel like I am home no matter where we are." I feel the same way. I was so lost when I came here, Yates. I thought I was just surviving, just trying to get through each day. But you showed me that I could have more than that I deserve more than that. We both deserve it, and we are going to build it together. I promise you that. They left Portland on the morning train, heading south toward California and an uncertain future. Rebecca watched Oregon disappear out the window and felt no regret. She was with Yates, and that was all that mattered. California proved to be both harder and better than they had expected. They found work at a large cattle operation near Sacramento, with Rebecca cooking for the ranch crew and Yates working as a cowhand. The pay was decent, the food was good, and they were able to save money steadily. But it was not easy. The head cook was a temperamental woman named Martha who resented Rebecca's skills and made her life difficult whenever possible. The other cowboys were initially suspicious of Yates, the outsider from Oregon, and he had to prove himself repeatedly. Rebecca dealt with Martha's hostility by simply doing excellent work and refusing to be drawn into arguments. When Martha tried to sabotage a meal by dumping too much salt into a stew, Rebecca calmly started over, working through the night to ensure the men were fed properly in the morning. When Martha spread rumors that Rebecca was lazy or incompetent, Rebecca let her work speak for itself. Eventually, Martha overplayed her hand. She tried to blame Rebecca for a broken stove that Martha herself had damaged in a fit of temper, and the ranch owner's wife, who had been quietly observing the situation, intervened. Martha was let go, and Rebecca was promoted to head cook with a significant raise in pay. Yates faced his own challenges. There was a cowboy named Jack Brennan who seemed to have it out for him from the start, making snide comments about Oregon cowboys and going out of his way to make Yates's work harder. It came to a head one day when Brennan cut Yates's saddle cinch, causing him to be thrown when the saddle slipped during a cattle drive. Yates could have been seriously injured, but he managed to land clear of the stampeding cattle. When he discovered the cut cinch, he confronted Brennan in front of the other hands. Brennan tried to laugh it off, but the ranch foreman had seen enough. Brennan was fired on the spot, and the other cowboys finally accepted Yates as one of their own. Through it all, Rebecca and Yates had each other. They lived in a small cabin on the ranch property, just one room with a loft and a tiny kitchen, but it was theirs. Rebecca made it a home with curtains sewn from flour sacks and wildflowers in mason jars. Yates built furniture in his spare time, a table and chairs, a proper bed frame, shelves for Rebecca's growing collection of cookbooks and recipe cards. They fell into routines and rhythms, learning each other's habits and moods. Rebecca discovered that Yates was an early riser who liked to watch the sunrise with a cup of coffee. Yates learned that Rebecca sang while she cooked, old hymns from her childhood in Philadelphia. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing their dreams and fears and the mundane details of their days. At night, they came together with increasing confidence and passion, learning what pleased each other, building intimacy that went beyond the physical. Rebecca had never imagined that marriage could be like this partnership and pleasure and deep abiding affection. The months passed. Summer turned to fall, fall to winter. They saved their money carefully, adding to the fund that would eventually buy them land of their own. Rebecca took on additional work baking pies and bread for some of the neighboring ranches, and Yates sometimes hired out for specialized jobs like horse breaking or fence building. It was in the spring of 1879 that they got word of an opportunity. A small ranch about 50 miles northeast of Sacramento was for sale. The owner had died without heirs, and the bank was looking to unload it quickly. It was only 200 acres, a fraction of the size of the ranches they had been working on, but it had water rights, good grazing, and a house that, while run down, was structurally sound. They went to look at it on a Sunday, borrowing a wagon for the day-long trip. The ranch sat in a valley between rolling hills, with a creek running through the property and oak trees providing shade. The house was a simple 4-room structure that needed work, but Rebecca could see its potential. The barn was solid, and there were existing corrals that just needed repair. "We could do this," Yates said, standing on the porch and looking out at the land. "It is small, but we could start with maybe 50 head of cattle, build up slowly. You could have a garden, maybe some chickens. We could make this work." Rebecca stood beside him, her hand in his, and imagined their future. She could see children playing in the yard, clothes hanging on a line, smoke rising from the chimney on cold mornings. She could see Yates riding the property, checking fences and tending cattle. She could see herself in the kitchen, cooking not just for survival but for joy, feeding her family and building a life. "How much are they asking?" He named a figure that was almost exactly what they had saved. "It would take everything we have. We would be starting with nothing except the land and each other. That is all we need." They bought the ranch in April of 1879, signing the papers in Sacramento and becoming landowners for the first time in their lives. The feeling was indescribable. This was theirs, truly theirs, not borrowed or rented or held at someone else's pleasure. They gave notice at their jobs and spent 2 weeks gathering supplies and making arrangements. Some of the cowboys from the Sacramento ranch helped them move, hauling lumber and tools and furniture in multiple wagon trips. The ranch owner's wife gave Rebecca canned goods and seeds for her garden, along with a breeding pair of chickens in a wooden crate. Their first night in their own home was spent on the floor in front of the fireplace, too exhausted to even set up the bed. They ate cold beans straight from the pot and drank creek water from tin cups, and it was the best meal Rebecca could remember. "We did it," Yates said, his arm around her shoulders as they watched the fire. "We actually did it. We did. Though now comes the hard part. The hard part, making it succeed, keeping it going, building something that lasts." He kissed her temple. "We fed 12 hungry ranch hands from one pot, Rebecca. We survived Martha and Jack Brennan and everything else that was thrown at us. We can handle whatever comes next." And they did. That first year was brutal. They worked from dawn until long after dark, repairing fences, building a chicken coop, clearing land for crops, tending their small herd of cattle that they had bought with money borrowed from the bank. Rebecca planted a garden that flourished in the California sun, providing them with vegetables to eat and preserve for winter. Yates broke horses for neighboring ranches to earn extra money, coming home exhausted and sore but satisfied. There were setbacks. A late frost killed half of Rebecca's seedlings. Coyotes got into the chicken coop and killed 3 birds before Yates could reinforce it. One of their best cows died giving birth to a calf that they then had to hand raise. Money was perpetually tight, and there were nights when they went to bed worried about how they would make the loan payment. But there were triumphs too. The hand-raised calf, which Rebecca named Clover, grew into a beautiful heifer that produced exceptional calves. Rebecca's garden produced so abundantly that she was able to sell vegetables to the general store in the nearest town. Yates's reputation as a horse breaker grew, and he had more work than he could handle. By their second year, they were not just surviving but beginning to thrive. They paid off the bank loan early, a moment of profound satisfaction. They added to their cattle herd, bringing it up to nearly 100 head. Yates hired a young cowboy named Tommy to help with the work, giving them both some breathing room. It was in the fall of 1880 that Rebecca realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, the subtle changes in her body and the wave of nausea that hit her every morning. She waited until she was certain before telling Yates, choosing a quiet evening when they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset. "I have news," she said, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. He looked at her, saw the expression on her face, and understanding dawned. "Rebecca." "Are you?" "I am. We are going to have a baby, probably in the spring." The joy on his face was uncontainable. He swept her into his arms, laughing and spinning her around until she begged him to stop before she got dizzy. Then he set her down carefully, as though she were made of glass, and placed his hand over hers on her belly. "A baby, our baby. Rebecca, I cannot believe it. Believe it. In about 5 months we are going to be parents." That winter, Yates became almost obsessively protective. He would not let Rebecca do any heavy lifting or work too long in the cold. He built a cradle in his workshop, sanding and re-sanding it until it was perfectly smooth. Rebecca sewed baby clothes and blankets, her hands flying over the fabric as she imagined their child. They argued about names, laughing as they rejected increasingly absurd suggestions. They settled on Rose if it was a girl, after Rebecca's mother, and James if it was a boy, after Yates's father, who had died when Yates was young. The baby came on a warm April morning in 1881, after a labor that lasted most of the night. The local midwife attended, along with a neighbor woman who had experience with births. Yates paced the porch, useless and terrified, until he heard the baby's first cry. It was a girl, tiny and red-faced and perfect. They named her Rose, and when the midwife placed her in Rebecca's arms, Rebecca felt a love so fierce it was almost painful. Yates sat beside the bed, staring at his daughter with wonder in his eyes. "She is so small," he whispered. "How can she be so small? She will grow, and we will teach her everything. How to be strong and kind and brave, like her mother." Rose was a good baby, fussy at first but settling into a routine quickly. Rebecca marveled at how their lives had expanded to include this tiny person, how every decision now involved considering what was best for her. Yates was a devoted father, getting up for midnight feedings and walking the floor with Rose when she was colicky, singing off-key lullabies that somehow soothed her. The ranch continued to grow. By 1883, they had expanded their land to 300 acres by buying the adjacent property. Their cattle herd numbered nearly 200 head, and they had built a reputation for quality beef. Rebecca had turned her cooking skills into a small side business, providing baked goods and preserved foods to stores in 3 different towns. Rose was a bright, curious toddler who followed her father everywhere and helped her mother in the garden with more enthusiasm than skill. They talked about having more children, but Rebecca had 2 miscarriages that left them heartbroken and cautious. It was not until 1885 that Rebecca became pregnant again, and this time she carried the baby to term. Their son James was born in February, a robust baby who came into the world yelling and never really stopped. Where Rose had been a calm baby, James was constant motion and noise. Yates joked that they had gotten one of each kind of child, and now they understood the full spectrum of what parenting could entail. Rose adored her little brother, though she was sometimes jealous of the attention he required. At 4 years old, she was old enough to be a helper, fetching diapers and singing to James when he fussed. Rebecca watched her daughter with pride, seeing glimpses of the woman she would become. The years continued to pass, marked by the rhythms of ranch life. Branding in the spring, haying in the summer, cattle drives in the fall, mending and maintaining through the winter. Rose started school in the small 1-room schoolhouse 5 miles away, riding there on her pony with her lunch pail packed by Rebecca each morning. James grew from a fussy baby into a rambunctious toddler who gave them all gray hairs with his fearless climbing and exploring. In 1887, Rebecca and Yates celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary. Tommy, who still worked for them and had become like family, watched the children while they took a rare evening to themselves. They rode up to the hill overlooking their ranch, the place where they often went when they needed to think or talk or simply be together. 10 years, Rebecca said, sitting beside Yates on the blanket they had spread on the grass. It feels like both a lifetime and no time at all. I know what you mean. Sometimes I still see you in that kitchen at the Drake Ranch, feeding all of us from that one pot and looking so determined. And then I blink and we are here with 2 children and land and a life I never dared to dream about. Do you ever regret it? The wandering life you gave up, the dreams of bigger things? He turned to look at her, his eyes serious. Rebecca, this is the bigger thing. This ranch, our family, the life we have built together. This is everything I ever wanted, even when I did not know I wanted it. You gave me a home, not just a place to sleep, but a real home. And I love you more today than I did the day we married. She kissed him then, there on the hillside as the sun set over their land. I love you too. Thank you for asking me to come with you that day at the Drake Ranch. Thank you for seeing something in me that I did not see in myself. We saw it in each other. That is what makes us work. They made love there on the hillside, gentle and tender, reaffirming the connection that had sustained them through every challenge. Afterward, they lay wrapped in the blanket and watched the stars emerge, talking about their hopes for the future and their gratitude for the present. The children grew. Rose became a skilled rider and crack shot, able to handle ranch work as well as any of the hands Yates hired. She had her father's green eyes and her mother's determination, along with a fierce independence that sometimes worried Rebecca. James was more like his father in temperament, easygoing and friendly, with a gift for working with animals that showed itself early. In 1889, Rebecca's aunt wrote from Portland with news that her uncle had passed away. The letter was stiff and formal, but included an invitation for Rebecca to visit if she wished. Rebecca thought about it for a long time before deciding to make the trip, bringing Rose with her but leaving James, who was only 4, at home with Yates. Portland had changed in the 11 years since she had left. It was bigger, more prosperous, with new buildings and more traffic in the streets. Her aunt had aged considerably, worn down by raising 6 children and losing her husband. The house was shabbier than Rebecca remembered, the furniture threadbare. They had an awkward tea in the front parlor, with Rose sitting quietly and observing everything with her sharp eyes. Rebecca's aunt asked polite questions about the ranch and made vague noises about how nice it must be, but Rebecca could see the doubt in her eyes. The unspoken question of whether Rebecca had made the right choice all those years ago. On the train ride home, Rose asked, "Are you sad we went?" Rebecca considered the question. "No, I needed to see where I came from to fully appreciate where I am now. That house never felt like home to me, even when I lived there. Our ranch, that is home. Good, because I never want to live anywhere else." Rebecca smiled and hugged her daughter. Neither do I. The 1890s brought new challenges and changes. A drought in 1892 forced them to sell off some of their cattle and dig a new well. A bumper crop year in 1894 allowed them to finally build the larger house they had been planning. A 2-story structure with 4 bedrooms and a proper kitchen that was Rebecca's pride and joy. Tommy married a girl from town and built a cabin on their property, staying on as foreman and becoming even more integral to the ranch's success. Rose, now a teenager, began showing interest in a young cowboy named Daniel who worked on a neighboring ranch. Yates was predictably protective, but Rebecca could see that Daniel was a good young man, hardworking and respectful. James, at 9 years old, announced that he wanted to be a veterinarian when he grew up. The local veterinarian, Dr. Harrison, took James under his wing, teaching him about animal health and medicine. Yates was proud, though he hoped James would eventually come back to the ranch after his training. In 1895, Rebecca and Yates attended Rose's high school graduation. She was 18, poised on the edge of adulthood, and had decided to attend a teaching college in Sacramento. It was bittersweet, watching their daughter prepare to leave home, but they were immensely proud of her ambition and intelligence. "She gets that from you," Yates told Rebecca the night after graduation. "That drive to better herself, to reach for more. She gets it from both of us. We taught her that dreams are worth pursuing." Rose left for college in the fall, and the house felt emptier without her. But she came home for holidays and summers, regaling them with stories of her classes and her friends. In her second year, she brought Daniel home with her, and they announced their engagement. The wedding was held at the ranch in June of 1898, with half the county in attendance. Rebecca cooked for days, preparing an elaborate feast, with the help of women from town and several professional cooks she hired for the occasion. Rose was a beautiful bride, radiant in a white dress that Rebecca had sewn herself, and Daniel looked at her as though she were the only person in the world. Watching them exchange vows, Rebecca felt Yates's hand find hers. She glanced at him and saw tears in his eyes. "What are you thinking?" She whispered, "That it goes too fast. 1 minute she was a baby in your arms, and now she is someone's wife. We did a good job raising her. We did, thanks to you, thanks to us." Rose and Daniel settled on a small ranch not far away, and life continued its forward march. James finished school and went off to veterinary college in San Francisco, writing long letters home about his studies and the city. Rebecca and Yates, now in their 40s, found themselves with an empty nest and had to relearn how to be just the two of them again. It was not a hardship. If anything, they grew even closer, rediscovering the easy companionship that had marked their early years together. They took trips to San Francisco to visit James, marveling at the city's energy and chaos. They expanded the ranch further, buying another adjacent property and increasing their herd. In 1900, Rose made them grandparents for the first time, delivering a healthy baby boy she named Yates after his grandfather. Rebecca held her grandson and felt the circle of life complete itself. This was what they had built, not just a ranch or a business, but a family, a legacy that would continue beyond them. James graduated from veterinary college in 1902 and surprised them by moving back to the area, setting up a practice that served the ranching community. He met a school teacher named Margaret, and they married in a quiet ceremony in 1903. Their first child, a daughter they named Rebecca, was born the following year. As the new century progressed, Rebecca and Yates gradually stepped back from the day-to-day running of the ranch. Tommy's son, now grown, took over more of the management responsibilities. Rose and Daniel's ranch was thriving, and they had 3 children keeping them busy. James's veterinary practice was successful, and he and Margaret had 2 more children after Rebecca. Rebecca was in her late 50s now, her dark hair streaked with silver, her hands marked by years of work. Yates's hair had gone almost entirely gray, and he moved a bit slower on cold mornings, but his eyes were still the same green that had captured her heart so many years ago. They sat on the porch of their home on summer evenings, watching the sunset and talking about the past and the future. They had built something remarkable here, something that had started with a pot of beans and a cowboy's shy smile in a failing ranch's kitchen. "Do you remember that first meal you cooked for us?" Yates asked one evening. At the Drake Ranch, of course I remember. I was terrified I would not have enough food, and then you all kept coming one after another until there were 12 of you. I watched you that day, saw the determination on your face. You were so strong, so capable. I knew right then that you were someone special. I knew you were special too. You were kind when you did not have to be. You saw me, really saw me, when I felt invisible. I am glad I came in for supper that day instead of going to town. Rebecca laughed. You never ate supper in town again, did you? Never. Why would I when I had you? They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands as they had done thousands of times over the years. The ranch spread out before them, bathed in golden light. Somewhere in the distance, they could hear cattle lowing and birds singing their evening songs. We made a good life, Rebecca said softly, the best life. And it all started because you fed 12 hungry ranch hands from one pot. And because a cowboy had the courage to ask me to go with him. We were brave together. That was the secret. In 1910, Rebecca and Yates celebrated their 32nd wedding anniversary. Their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a party that lasted all day and into the night. There were games for the children, music and dancing, and more food than even Rebecca in her prime could have prepared alone. As the celebration wound down and family members began leaving, Rose pulled her mother aside. Mother, I want you to know how grateful I am for everything you and Daddy gave me. You showed me what a real marriage looks like, what real love is. You taught me to be strong and independent, but also how to be part of a partnership. I hope I am giving my children even half of what you gave me. Rebecca hugged her daughter tight, tears streaming down her face. You are giving them so much more. I am so proud of you, Rose, so proud of the woman you have become. Later, when everyone had left and the house was quiet, Rebecca and Yates prepared for bed. Rebecca stood at the window, looking out at the land they had built their lives on, and felt a profound sense of peace and gratitude. What are you thinking about? Yates asked, coming to stand behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. Everything. The journey we have been on. How blessed we are. We are blessed. But we also worked for it, we fought for it, we never gave up even when things were hard. We never gave up on each other. He turned her to face him, his hands cupping her face tenderly. I love you, Rebecca Ingram. I have loved you since the day you fed me from that pot, and I will love you until the day I die. And I love you, Yates Ingram. You are my home, my partner, my everything. They kissed, gentle and sweet, a kiss that held 32 years of love and commitment and shared dreams. Outside, the Oregon stars shone bright, just as they had all those years ago when two people took a chance on each other and built a life from nothing more than hope and hard work, and a pot of beans that fed 12 hungry men. The years continued to pass gently. Rebecca and Yates grew old together on the ranch they had built, surrounded by children and grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren. They never left the land, never wanted to. It was their home, their legacy, the physical manifestation of the love they had shared for so many years. They died within months of each other in 1918, both in their 70s, both peacefully in their sleep. Rebecca went first, on a warm September morning with Yates holding her hand. He followed that December, on a snowy evening, surrounded by family who swore he smiled at the end, as though he could see Rebecca waiting for him. They were buried on the hillside overlooking their ranch, the place where they had gone so many times to talk and dream and love. Their graves stood side by side, the headstones simple but inscribed with the words that mattered most. Together forever. The ranch stayed in the family, passed down through Rose and her children, and then their children after that. The original house stood for decades, a landmark that reminded each generation of where they had come from. And the story was told and retold, becoming family legend. The story of Rebecca, who fed 12 hungry ranch hands from one pot, and Yates, the cowboy who never ate supper in town again because he had found something far more nourishing at that simple kitchen table. It was a story of love and courage, of hard work and determination, of two people who took a chance on each other and built something that lasted far beyond their own lives. It was the story of the American West, of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, of dreams pursued and achieved through grit and faith, and the unshakable belief that together, anything was possible. And it all started with a pot of beans, a hungry cowboy, and a woman who refused to give up, even when she had every reason to. That was the real magic, the true heart of the story. That love can begin in the most unlikely places, with the simplest gestures, and grow into something that changes not just two lives but generations to come. The ranch still stands today, operated by Rebecca and Yates's descendants, a testament to what two people can build when they have love, determination, and each other. And sometimes, on quiet summer evenings, if you stand on that hillside where they are buried and listen carefully, you can almost hear them. Rebecca humming as she cooks, Yates laughing at something she said, the sounds of a love that transcended even death itself. That is the legacy they left. Not just land or cattle or a family name, but the knowledge that true love exists, that it can survive hardship and challenge and the passage of time. They proved that a marriage built on mutual respect, shared dreams, and genuine partnership can be the foundation for everything else that matters. Rebecca never forgot where she came from, the scared young woman who arrived in Oregon with nothing but determination and a willingness to work. Yates never forgot the aimless cowboy he had been before he met her, drifting from job to job without real purpose. Together, they became more than they could have been apart, each one making the other stronger, better, more complete. Their grandchildren and great-grandchildren grew up hearing the stories, learning the lessons that Rebecca and Yates had learned through hard experience. They learned about perseverance, about making do with what you have, about the importance of feeding both body and soul. They learned that love is not just a feeling but a choice, made every day, sometimes multiple times a day, to put the other person first and work together toward common goals. The pot that Rebecca used that fateful day was preserved, passed down through the family as a precious heirloom. It sat in a place of honor in the ranch house, battered and stained but still solid, a reminder of where it all began. Each new generation was told the story of the 12 hungry ranch hands and the woman who fed them when she barely had enough for 6, of the cowboy who fell in love over beans and salt pork, of the life they built together from those humble beginnings. It became a tradition in the family to use that pot for special occasions, to cook meals that brought everyone together. And when family gathered around the table, breaking bread and sharing stories and laughter, they were continuing the legacy that Rebecca and Yates had started all those years ago. They were proving that family is not just about blood, but about the bonds we forge through shared meals, shared work, shared love. The ranch itself changed and evolved with each generation, adapting to new technologies and new ways of doing things. But the core values that Rebecca and Yates had instilled remained constant. Hard work, integrity, compassion, and the belief that anything worth having is worth fighting for. Those values shaped not just the family but the entire community, as Rebecca and Yates's descendants went on to be teachers and doctors and civic leaders, carrying forward the lessons they had learned at that ranch house table. And through it all, the love story remained at the heart of everything. It was told to children at bedtime, to teenagers struggling with their own first loves, to couples facing challenges in their marriages. It was a reminder that true love is not easy or simple or perfect, but it is worth it. It is worth the risk, worth the work, worth the leap of faith. Rebecca and Yates's story proved that sometimes the most extraordinary things begin with the most ordinary moments. A pot of beans, a hungry cowboy, a woman doing her best with what little she had. From those simple elements came a love that changed lives, built a legacy, and inspired generations. That was the true miracle, the real magic. That love, when nurtured and protected and given room to grow, can transform everything it touches. And so the story lives on, passed down from parent to child, from grandparent to grandchild, a testament to the enduring power of love and commitment. It reminds us that we are all capable of extraordinary things, that our choices matter, that the connections we make with others can shape not just our own lives, but the lives of people we will never meet. Rebecca fed 12 hungry ranch hands from one pot, and Yates never ate supper in town again. That simple sentence contained within it an entire universe of meaning, a lifetime of love and work and sacrifice and joy. It was the beginning of something beautiful, something lasting, something that proved beyond doubt that love, when it is real and true and deep, can overcome any obstacle and build any dream. That was their gift to the world, their legacy to their descendants and to anyone who heard their story. They showed us what is possible when two people dare to believe in each other, when they commit to building something together, when they choose love every single day no matter how hard things get. They showed us that happily ever after is not a fairy tale ending but a daily practice, a conscious choice, a journey taken hand in hand with the person you love. And as the sun set over the ranch one more time, casting golden light across the fields and pastures that Rebecca and Yates had worked so hard to build, their spirits seemed to hover there on the hillside where they were buried, watching over the family they had created, the legacy they had left, the love that would never die. They had fed each other, body and soul, for over 30 years, and that nourishment continued to sustain their family long after they were gone. That was the true meaning of the story, the lesson that echoed through generations. That when we feed each other, when we nourish each other with love and support and commitment, we create something that transcends our individual lives. We become part of something larger, something eternal, something that proves beyond doubt that love is the most powerful force in the universe. Rebecca and Yates had discovered that truth in a failing ranch kitchen in Oregon in 1878, and they had lived it every day of their lives together. They had built a home, raised a family, created a legacy, and shown the world what true love looks like. And their story, like their love, would live forever, inspiring anyone who heard it to take that leap of faith, to feed the hungry, to love without reservation, and to believe that anything is possible when two people face the world together. The end of their story was really just the beginning of a legacy that would continue for generations. Proof that one pot of beans and one cowboy's smile could change the world.